Okay. Thank you for staying with us throughout this conference. It's been a very long 3 days. Massive thanks to all the hardworking people who sustained the work of this conference, from planning to execution. Thank you so much. They're not even in this room, but really. And finally, thank you to our panelists today who are helping us close this conference on a high note. This panel is called How to Design a Successful BDS Campaign. We have delegates from various European locations who in their campaigns have tried a diversity of strategy and tactics. We'll hear from Alexander from Technical University Delft, Lukman from King's College London, Laia from Technical University Catalonia, and Brittany from Acampada por Palestina Madrid, Encampment for Palestine Madrid. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to get into it. Yeah, can you clap? So, Alexander, I want to start with you. When we spoke before this conference, your situation at TU Delft seemed the closest to what we've experienced in Germany: a lack of discourse about Palestine on campus, difficulties mobilizing students and faculty, a feeling of isolation on campus as organizers. Your focus was also similar to what we've tried to approach in university organizing here, attacking the public image of the university, and to tell the truth about what's happening in Germany in terms of complicity in genocide, in terms of harsh repression. So I'd like to hear from you first. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right. We had the most similar situation, not yet the same repression we had. We also dealt with a lot of, basically, the university trying to ignore us and trying to isolate us and say, like, okay, it's nothing happening, it's nothing big going on. We are quite a big university, 35,000 students. And when I entered it, I really was surprised about the amount of disengagement compared to other universities. Because, for instance, I was acting in The Hague, and there was a lot of students mobilizing. And this was really a group of 20 people who did most of the work. We were met with a university who was rigid and not willing to talk, and then also not willing to act. So tonight I will first talk about two things. I will talk about how we started raising awareness under the students and also the professors. And then I will talk about how we ended up negotiating, not so much with sitting on a round table, but more about our actions and how that worked. So first, it's less engaged university. A lot of people think that it's because it's so scientific and it's fundamental at some parts that it's not related to politics. Well, of course it is, and we have many ties with Israel and many complicit ties. And so at the start of the movement, we started hosting teach-ins, we did walkouts, and we just found that there was a very low amount of people joining. So at some point it escalated, and we got to the point where we could have an encampment, which was tough because it was little people, and we had most people actually from outside also as well. But we had like a strong group which did end up holding it on for 21 days. And in this period, we also actually entered negotiations with the university. The university, they used a lot of stalling mechanisms in these talks. And we couldn't agree on more than a moral deliberation chamber. But we'll get to that there later. After the encampment, we focused also because we found out that we could reach some students, but we still had a hard time reaching staff, which is also essential for changing the movement and like engaging the whole university. So what we did is, instead of trying to invite them, we went to them and we made this box, which centered around the book of Maya Wind, Towers of Ivory and Steel, and it was basically an information package. So it was not accusing them of anything, it was just saying what is happening. First, there was information in this package, split into 3 groups. First, why do we need a boycott? And what is happening at the moment? Then, what does a boycott entail? And then a third, how does this relate to the TU Delft, and what can the staff do, and what can we do to actually change this? After this hosted event, where Maiwin spoke as well, and we got some professors where we remained in contact afterwards. So it was very useful to reach out. And if anybody wants to see this after, I can show them the box. Besides reaching out to staff, we also focused on maintaining a group of activists who remained active over the years, and also trying to reach out to more activists, because as some of you might know, definitely know, there's a lot change in universities. There's people going to exchange, there's people leaving, and it's hard sometimes to keep the momentum growing, especially when there's a small group of students. So I think what's now really our basis is that we have weekly lunches where everybody's welcome, and we do not talk specifically strategies, but it's more like a bonding experience, and we get new students to join. We offer some free tea and some free coffee, which turned out to be useful for us. Besides that, we also host weekly work sessions where we actually dive into what needs to be done, and we actually do the work, which also helps with maintaining the knowledge inside the system if you have the consistent meetings, and we are quite open, so everybody's welcome to these meetings, opposing to other universities where there's more security culture and it's more closed. And these meetings and these lunches really help with also creating like a base for actions, like for people who can show up at actions, not only organizing, but also just to show up. Because this is essential, because awareness is not enough to change the opinions of universities. And I think actions are the center of where we actually achieve stuff. Because our voices and like the continuous reach out to the university was mostly ignored. So after the encampment, we had 3 demands that we wanted to disclose. 3 main demands. We had more, but first of all, we wanted the TU Delft to disclose and cut their ties. Second of all, we wanted them to condemn what's happening in Gaza right now and in the whole of Palestine. And third, we wanted to show solidarity with the Palestinian people by also creating scholarships and reaching out to Palestinian universities. During these negotiations, like I said, we met with a lot of resistance, a lot of stalling, a lot like, okay, maybe we can look into it. And at the end, we did get the Moral Deliberation Chamber, which was a group of 9 staff members, and they said there was also a student may or may not involved, but we do not know the people who were in this committee, and they said they would look into it. We were a bit frustrated because we didn't get any results. That we just get like a promise of the university, which we obviously cannot trust, to look into it. So what we did, that we focused on really pushing, also besides on our demands, also on this Moral Deliberation Committee to bring out a report, to bring out what's happening. And we kept pushing over a long time, because it took them a long time to actually get out a report. And then 1.5 years into the genocide, and I think around 10 months after they started this chamber, we finally got the report. And the report basically said that the university should cut all future ties. Institutional ties, specifically. And that they should also review all the current ties and see if there's any complicity, and that then they should also cut. So this was our big first win, but it wasn't anything yet, because it was just a written piece of paper and the university hasn't acted upon it. So we really wanted to push on this momentum, and we had a big poster action. So in the night we glued a lot of posters around the campus, basically showing what the ties are, and also it's a general scream of attention of what is happening. And this was really with the goal also to push them to also make the executive decision to cut the future ties at least. And that's what happened. 5 days or a few days later, after this poster action, they ended up releasing a statement that they would have no more institutional ties. They did add a little backdoor in it. They said that if there was extensive research, that it wouldn't be complicit, that it would still be allowed. And they also said that they would review all the current ties. Our first reaction, we were happy because of this, but on the other hand, it does feel like not cutting current ties and not really and saying that they'll look into it is a promise that of course can take a long period of time again. And we're already by this 1.5 years into the genocide. So at this point, we started regrouping, looking at how we want to continue our movement. And then one of our students actually did research and found out that they started 2 new horizon ties right like after they released a press statement. And you can imagine that we were furious because it's also like the one win that we had seemed to be not worth anything because they would just go against their word. Yeah, and this fury ended up like being a bit more organized. We really strategically thought about how we would escalate, and we decided to occupy a building. We entered a roof, and we basically said we will not stay. We will stay until our demands are met. We wanted to negotiate with them again. We really wanted to get on the table, and we even set up a negotiation table. But of course, their end stayed empty. But that doesn't mean that we didn't negotiate while being on the roof. But we didn't negotiate by actually talking, but more about not leaving. So after a while being on the roof for a few hours, they released like some information that they said that these investments were already made, and that before that they said they were going to cut future ties and that they couldn't do anything about it. So, well, of course, this is for us another reason to leave, so we stayed. And then afterwards they got actual press release where they said, okay, we're going to pull out of one and the other one will review. And also, by the way, we cut, there was 3 more that we were going to do, and those we will not continue. And of course, that's a weird reasoning because there was more bad that we were going to do. And that should like give us some comfort, but of course it didn't. And they also released that if we were to leave now, that we wouldn't be arrested. Again, we declined this offer because we had our demands, and I think our demands weren't like, even in their own framework, weren't unreasonable. And yeah, we decided to stay and did get it, and everybody got up and got arrested in the end. But it's still, I think, one of our more powerful actions, because during these actions we did get something out of it. And of course it can be that they were already trying to get out of it, but it was really refueling for the movement as well to see this happening while we were doing the action. Yeah, I think during this whole movement we've really came to conclude that tarnishing the public image is the only really tool that we have and the only tool that worked for us specifically. And I think also that this can't be seen outside a wider context of the shift in public opinion also in the Netherlands. Like what we also did as student groups, together with other student groups, is organize bigger protests. And also Amnesty organized protests, and I think it's really important that all the student groups also showed up there. Because like at the start of the genocide, there was no big mobilization. And at the end, we had 250,000 people in Amsterdam, and that really created also, I think, more an environment where it was for the TU Delft image more important to cut those ties as well. And I think that's really important as well. And I know you have a different situation where you don't have these public shift yet, but I think it's also important to focus on that, because I think that's also what led to us having the wins that we had. And I think for the future, I think our university repeatedly showed that we cannot trust them. And so we will continue to not trust them. We will continue to push them on these agendas. And I think it is a nice win that we have them for the future. We have them basically locked down in a statement where they say they will not create new institutional ties. And it feels a bit difficult to assess if that's going to be helpful, because it's still ongoing and they still have ongoing ties, but at least, for the future, because these projects do run out. So in the future there will be a better academic boycott in TU Delft. Thank you, this was my speech.
Where'd my mic go? Sorry, longer. Thank you for that. Very interesting, and I do have some questions which we'll come to later. So Lukman, you occupy an interesting and I imagine also difficult position because you're both student and faculty, right? You're active in the National Universities and Colleges Union in the UK, represents over 1,800 members, so it's a substantial union. And And as a doctoral student, you've also been a bridge, and that's not an isolated case, I think. We've seen the strength of this particular career stage doctoral students at play in Germany as well. So please tell us more about how things have played out in your context and what the focus of your negotiations was. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can you hear me in the back? Well, amazing. If you see me gesticulating wildly, I'll be pointing to have the next slide, so I'll give a thumbs up. My name's Lukman. I'm a PhD student at King's College London. As Beldi pointed out, I and many PhD students here might understand, have a bit of an identity crisis. We're neither staff nor students. So what I did and what other PhD students perhaps did was weaponize that identity crisis and work with both the staff and the students and act as a bridge of often what feels like separated constituencies within the university who, for all intents, do have the same goal, but often at times might feel they don't have the numbers within each individual constituency to mobilize to the degree to affect change. And I think that's one thing I saw particularly at King's College London, and I'll point to that. So this, my part of it will just be one more case study about one additional node of the whole, the body of resistance and global intifada that we had, and I'll be talking about King's College London here. So I'm an executive member of the UCU. As Baldi pointed out, we have 1,800 members just at King's alone. So it represents the teaching staff, professors, PhD students across the board. So that's a very sizable group. We launched the encampment, the student encampments, on the 13th of May last year. Prior to that, there was no cross-communication between various groups. We mobilized students from across the cross-section of the university and got support from staff and then launched it. Actually, we launched our first encampment the day Maya was actually at UCL. So we launched at UCL first while we were at King's and then at King's. So we had the 5 demands on the next slide, which should look familiar to most universities, which were number 1, condemn, then boycott, divest, rebuild, and safeguard. I'll be talking at some detail about boycott, divest, and rebuild, so I can just tackle condemn and safeguard right at the top. King's condemned the invasion of Ukraine within a week. They condemned Hamas's attack within a week. Mind you, several thousand Gazans had already were killed by week 2. But they noted that as a humanitarian issue, whereas the tragedy of the people that were killed in Israel was noted, and then began a long period of silence until the encampment. They dealt with that as a lot of universities in the UK did by introducing a new policy called value-based neutrality, meaning that we made some mistakes in the past by condemning things, we're going to stay completely neutral now. So that was the first demand, which they didn't budge for another 2 years. We'll touch on academic boycott, divestment, and rebuild shortly. Safeguarding, mixed bag, as you know, across the board. They weaponized student investigations, non-academic misconduct to stifle dissent. They arbitrarily added various things into the protest policy after the first encampment, which was like no more tents because major health and safety risk, very convenient. So those were the top, number 1 and 5. We had real issues with the way they targeted Palestinian staff as well. Gazan staff who had several members of their family killed, whereas concurrently Zionist agitators who were bringing in actual fascist B'Tah protesters on campus, giving death threats. They were allowed for their investigations to continue until the student graduated, and then, well, they left, so there's nothing we can do about it. Whereas several students were suspended for far less. The academic I mentioned, Dr. Rana Bakr, who lost her grandmother, lost her uncle, dozens of family members had to endure investigation about her tweets from 10 years ago, and was only let off after the student who had accused her had graduated, so they couldn't do anything about him either. So it's quite an ordeal. So that tells you about number 1 and 5. But we made some headway on particularly 2 of them. So if you could go to the next slide. The next few slides are just to give a visual context. So we launched the encampment on the 13th of May. The university were relatively quick to get into negotiations. Death by bureaucracy, more or less. They know what to do. Their hope was that the movement would peter out if we just get them on the table. They assumed the students wouldn't know anything about the university's policies and investments. That wasn't always the case. It was perhaps some. The final image I just included for comedic purposes. They did an alumni alumni awards ceremony in which an alumnus, who I will speak to in a moment, was honored because the students nominated him for that award. He was killed in Gaza with most of his family, and when they awarded him, they did not say who killed him and the fact that his body was still under the rubble. So we protested there, and in a very non-violent way, actually, I was standing next to the door of the main gate, and this gentleman who's a lecturer in French just started grabbing me and shoving me around. So I met him a couple of weeks later, and I confronted him, asked, "Why did you assault me?" And on camera, he said, "I didn't assault you, I just pushed you." I didn't pursue that, I should have, but it's a good moment. If you could go to the next slide. This is a very important event that happened, I think, day 45, when the emergency committee, so those who were here yesterday, they came to King's, and they were doing a tour across the UK at that time, and they laid out what their demands and principles were, and I'll discuss those shortly as well. Conveniently, when we were making headway, the university then suspended the negotiations and then eventually evicted us on day 68 of the encampment. And now I'll talk about where those demands went in the course of the movement. Yes, please. We'll come back to this in the end, what happened after the encampment. So the next slide, please. Post-encampment, then, during that period of the encampment, we negotiated on divestment, boycott, and then rebuilding. This is where the Foucauldian analysis of knowledge as power really comes into place. They weaponized the fact that we did not have all the numbers, and then they utilized certain channels, meaning they kept some people on the negotiation table, some off, and then sneaked a deal with the student union officers to make it look like they'd made a major divestment. So if you could go to the next page, these headlines, perhaps some of you came across them over the summer of 2024, big headlines saying King's College becomes first London college to halt direct investments in Israel's arms suppliers. Several student groups, particularly the student union, took that as a massive win. What we later found out that, unbeknownst to us, King's has already been divesting from controversial weapons, so those are cluster bombs, biological and chemical weapons, and then use that to make it look like a win by just formalizing into the investment policy, and then saying, oh, we've made changes and we can't make any more changes for another 2 years, therefore we're closing the door of divestment. So what that made more evident, which we were already doing at the encampment, was that we needed to get our research right about down to every penny what KCL is invested in so that they can't squirm their way out next time we go to the negotiations. Next slide, please. So then began really painstaking work in putting out this report. I've put on the QR code, which will be up there for a few slides. Other universities like London School of Economics were really quick on this because they had been compiling their numbers prior to October 7th. So when the encampment launched, they had a report, a really remarkable report ready to launch. It took us some time. As you can see, we published it in 2024. Published under the name of the KCL BDS Forum. So it wasn't just the UCU, or it wasn't just KCL Stands for Justice, or other collectives within the university. We really put aside our grievances or whatever they might have been during the encampment and pooled all of our resources to put out this report. And I'd highly recommend you have a look as well. I'll go over some of the findings from that report. So the next slide, please. So undoubtedly, we found that King's was complicit in a myriad of ways in terms of their investments, their academic partnerships, the private funding, and their corporate partnerships. Next slide, please. Unlike America, I think like Harvard and Columbia, they have endowments of something like 50 billion. Relatively, for a UK context, King's has an endowment of around 350 million at this moment in time. I think that's like the fourth highest in the UK. Oxford and Cambridge have like £1 billion. But within that 300 million, we found that approximately £35 million of complicit investments, 11.9 million in weapons proliferation, 19.4 million specifically in the context of apartheid and occupation, and then the fossil fuels, which they had already added several years ago in line with ESG policies, they still hadn't divested a lot. So even with controversial weapons, we knew, and even if they did divest in terms of being complicit in genocide, we knew it might take several years and much more pushing for that to go forward. Some more numbers, again, do scan the QR code, and if you have a chance, I do suggest having a look at the whole paper. It goes into detail of the investments and specific case studies as well. Next slide, please. The academic tie is quite interesting. King's, we found, did not have extensive ties. You can find this out with an FOI with any given university. They had like a memorandum of understanding with the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, which they'd terminated even prior to October 7th. But they had some, disparate European Commission projects across Europe. I think total 8 of them. In the negotiations, they categorically said that they will not boycott universities in principle. In fact, I've got a small note there saying caveat Shittij, comment. Shittij is the vice-chancellor of our university. I confronted him, I asked him, and it was quite interesting. What I found was that King's had 8 projects with Israeli universities. Forget Palestinian universities, didn't have a single project with any university in the Middle East or Asia. So I asked him, and I'll be able to defend this in a court of law. I asked him, why is it that King's had so many projects with Israeli universities and not a single one with a Palestinian or Arab university? Word for word, he said, because that's where all the talent is. Take what you want with that. So we knew that there was not much headway we were going to make there. But because there were individual projects, we found out £35 million of investments and the opportunity to rebuild. We focused our efforts on that. Next slide, please. And this was a turning point for us in the movement. With PACB, with the BDS movement, Palestinian civil society has made very clear what they want of us to do in terms of boycott and divestment. It wasn't so clear about rebuilding. And I think being overzealous as we were, we thought we knew what the Gazan universities need. We thought we knew what Gazan students need. So we had all these, demands about scholarships and just... That was more or less it, just putting as much money into possible into a pool for scholarships for Palestinian students to come over. Several deans from the universities in Gaza, Al-Azhar University and the Islamic University, came to the encampment and gave the 6 principles which they conveyed to all the universities that they went to, and which is on their website, gazauniversities.org. I hope some of you did have a chance to look at it yesterday. If you could go on the next slide. What they told us, and it was a really wake up and smell the coffee moment for us, which was that the universities should and must make public pledges to rebuild Gaza universities. At that time, we were saying that the university should allocate some funds to rebuilding. What we found later was that, and this came out through a New York Times article, was that King's had their name under a project to build a university in Gaza, which was fundamentally going to be driven and organized by the US and Israel, and by determining the syllabus there. They were like, do not naively put your weight behind a project like that. It will do actually more damage for the erasure of Palestinian and Gazan academia than you can think. Number 2 was that immediate support for online instructions. As was pointed out yesterday, the university structures, the physical buildings might not have been there, but they continued intent. They continued wherever possible that they could. So needing support with online content, sponsorships over scholarships. That's something that they reiterated quite a lot. Not just the brain drain, but saying that we need to help students and Gazan universities continue and reinvigorate their education system on their own terms. Students who are in exile, whether in Egypt, whether in other parts of the Middle East or Europe, supporting them, and then long-term cooperation, faculty fellowships and research cooperation. We were very fortunate that actually, and this was a great twist of fate, that the very next day we were meant to have our negotiation meeting on rebuilding. And the person we were negotiating with, the dean of the university, happened to be at the meeting with the deans of the Gazan universities. And we got, in the discussion, she seemed exceptionally shy and had to give a commitment, but we knew that she knew everything, all the pledges. So the moment we actually went to the negotiation meeting, the very next day, she had the 6 principles in front of her. And then we didn't have to do that dance of having to go over those. We began talking about what can be done. And actually, one of the negotiators recognized that scholasticide is a fact, so that's some headway, unofficially. Can we go to the next slide, please? After the encampment, then they actually gave us a framework of how King's will potentially help with the rebuilding of the education sector in Gaza beyond the public pledge. They had a plan for the immediate help, which is mostly regarding online content. Secondly, long-term medium, which is about working with universities in Palestine and the region to provide support in strengthening the provision and increasing access to higher education, and the long term about how they engage academics to build research ties with Palestinian universities. Sounded good. Next slide, please. This is another thing that we were really pushing for, which is 2 members of the King's academic community were martyred in Gaza. In the first case, Dr. Mesa Reyes, who had recently at that time completed his MSc in Women and Children's Health. He was in Gaza before October 7th, and on the, I believe, 9th of October, his house was bombed, and then several of his family members were killed. Him and his brothers, I believe, were out of the house. They went back to see the rubble, to find their family members under the rubble, and Israel struck again, and then killed him and his brothers as well at the same time. They were honoring him, allegedly, in May of 2024 by whitewashing the circumstances of his murder. And then Dr. Adnan al-Bush, who perhaps you might have seen some coverage about. He was the head of orthopedics in Al-Shifa Hospital. He was abducted in November and then tortured, and some reports even suggest raped before being murdered. We will see in the next slide, I'll show shortly, that King's did have some recognition towards Dr. Mesa, but to this day they deny that Dr. Adnan al-Bush was any member of the King's community, so far away from condemning it. But through that protest that we did on the alumni awards and the pressure that the UCU and the students we exerted, they launched a scholarship, again problematic, but still movement forward, in the name of Dr. Mesa, which is one yearly scholarship for a master's degree in public health. They invited Dr. Mesa's widow, his sister, and his best friend, and his sister actually made a Tatriz portrait, which is now permanently there within one of the main libraries as soon as you walk in. And beyond that, we had to fight what text goes next to it. And within the text, it notes now that he was killed by an Israeli strike, along with other family members. And at the moment the portrait was put up, his body is still under the rubble. So that was a step forward, I think, not to carry too much water for the university, again noting the problem with scholarships and not sponsorships. And just on that point of the sponsorships, for the longest time, because they had met the emergency committee, they would not commit to meeting the emergency committee again. And for months and months and months, we kept pushing them, why not? You're going to imagine the needs of the universities there. And then like 5 months down the line, the person that we had to deal with was the director of education, whose LinkedIn I stalked, and I found that the only thing he liked there was the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Then eventually he came out and said it. I was like, why will you not communicate with the emergency committee after they gave you the principles which you allege to uphold and give us a framework? One word, he said, and how he said it is Hamas. They might be connected to Hamas. That's why we cannot sponsor them, give them any money, or be in any direct communication with them, so it doesn't become a liability for King's College London. Next slide, please. We kept mobilizing, we kept negotiating, and then we realized that they were really taking us for a ride. They kept reneging on their promises on that framework. The divestment negotiations were going interesting places. So what we did with the next encampment was that we didn't ask for £35 million of investments, even though we pointed out to a penny and knew where all the money was. We pared it down to that lowest common denominator, which for us was the blacklist companies that the UN had put out. And we found out the Kings had invested in 9 of them, and they only had £300,000 of a £300 million endowment invested in the UN blacklist companies. There's no moral basis why they should have invested in the blacklist companies in the first place. So we presented them with the lowest common denominator to see whether they'll play ball. And the CFO came running to the encampment, took me to the side, and he said, we could do it. But what if this is the thin end of the wedge? Meaning, what if we divest from this and then tomorrow you ask us to divest from something more? I was like, we're going to make no apologies for asking you to do the right thing, the moral thing at this moment in time. But what did they do? Yes. What did they do? They evicted us. They told us to submit a paper. We wrote a lengthy report, submitted it. They even gave us the opportunity to present the paper. Nope, we're not going to do anything. And plus, they already said that we only amend the ethical investment policy every couple of years anyway, which is actually coming up in a few months. So it'll be interesting to see what they've prepared for this time around. Next slide, please. Finally, just a couple of points that I want to reflect on, and then I'll be wrapping up. Any of you who's been involved, all of you, I imagine, in this activism has to know that the last 2 years felt like a decade. So there's a lot to reflect on in a couple of minutes, but I think there was just 2 points, and I hope that's come across already, was the need to mobilize across students and staff bodies, and the importance of particularly PhD students in bridging that gap. Staff have been immensely helpful. They've been, those of you who were here in the previous panel saw Hannah Kienzler, who was a professor at King's, been incredibly helpful, teachings at our movements, research support helping with that BDS report, petitions for students that have been suspended or had non-academic misconducts, financial support, creating the space for negotiations for us. So I really want to drive that point home about the importance to bridge the gap between students and staff. A final point, and this was really brought home by the moment the emergency committee told us, and the moment, I had to go back and my face was red by embarrassment, by thinking, who the hell did I think I was to know what Gazan universities and academics need at this moment in time? And that's, I think, something that needs to be in the forefront of myself first, is a real epistemic humility and a reflexive way in which we reflect on that regularly in academia and activism, particularly around Palestine. That the fact that we were originally calling for actions which would have perpetuated the conditions of colonialism within that context. But even I want to say, just, and I'll end on this, is that even from a super zoomed out perspective, I think this also extends to the vernacular and teleology of the resistance of the people of Gaza themselves, and how sometimes as activists we tend to sometimes superimpose our discourse and our epistemologies that might often even preclude the people of Gaza themselves. Often we don't need to theorize why they're resisting or what they need, when we can literally just ask them how we can support their rebuilding, how we can support their resistance without whitewashing or diluting any of their narratives. With that, I'd like to end. Thank you very much.
I'll just speak from here because I'll have to get down again for your slides. So Laia, we move on to another career stage with you. Do you have it? Thank you, Brittany. You are an associate professor at Technical University Catalonia, right? But you've also been an organizer in the Palestine Solidarity Movement for a long time. So I'd really like to hear from you thoughts on how you've watched the movement evolve and what the current stakes are. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here, and it has been a really interesting, amazing conference. I want to give some context that will seem to the prehistoric times, but I think it is important to understand that the situation in Catalonia and Spain is quite different from what you have here in Germany, and also what our colleagues were explaining. We have a strong, I will talk about Catalonia and also Spain, but in Catalonia, I think it's comparable in Spain, we have a strong solidarity movement, long history. And this movement was having a crucial transition when BDS campaign demanded by the civil society in Palestine come in force. So from, I would say, 2005 until 2015, from cooperation, solidarity understood as an existential solidarity, to political solidarity and involvement in the BDS demands, so accountability and complicity. And in the case of Catalonia, in Spain was similar. It was not until 2015 that most of or a huge number of the organizations working for or involved in the Palestinian movement endorsed BDS. Until this moment, there was a lot of controversy, would say even fights, difficult to work together even between the NGOs or associations that have implemented BDS and the ones that were reluctant, that were thinking that boycott was too much, that they will be hindered from some funding. So this was going on. And I think this is important to understand because academia works or goes in parallel with the society, so we are not going faster sometimes. So if this debate is on place in the society, it also happens in the university. And inside the university, we had the same debate, and this Universitary Commission for Catalan for Palestine was on place maybe 2008-2009 with one of the brutal bombings of Gaza Strip. And as you see here, in 2011, we created this platform of Academic Boycott of Israel in Spain, joined by different staff and students. So all this debate was in place, and it was not easy to get to a consensus of boycott. And I think here in Germany, this is also happening among societies. So probably you are facing a situation where boycott is still a strong word for some people, even outside academia. And that's happening also when you try to engage teachers, professors, and so on. So this we have to keep it in mind, that the battle has to be in the university and outside the university to change the frame. The academic boycott campaigns that we have been launching, I think, have these three elements in common. So and I think it was highlighted also by our PACB colleagues yesterday. We need to have information about the real links and complicities of your institution. As Lugnaman was saying, it is otherwise sometimes difficult to negotiate, easy that you are cut in a moment where you hesitate and so on. So you need this information. You also need to have knowledge about the decision-making process inside universities. And this might seem, well, we all know how it works, but might not be true. It can happen that students, especially bachelor students, they don't have the obligation, and they don't have to know a lot about all these organisms and institutions inside the university, and that might make them difficult to come to a point where they are in the possibility to negotiate with the decision makers of the university. And I think here is where staff can have a synergy with the students. And then you need strong grassroots movement to make changes and to oblige universities, board of directions, to implement measures. And that's also something that we have seen. Until there is not public opinion, movement inside the universities are very reluctant to take this type of decisions. Regarding the information about the links, you have done wonderful investigation work I have seen, and we also have to be aware that we have some tools that the universities are obliged to have, like the transparency portals. I think it is a European Union obligation, but at least in Spain it's like this. You can ask any university, as a citizen, you can ask any university for information. Of course, you have to write very well what you want them to give you, because they will stick to what you have written. So if you want horizon projects, if you want bilateral agreements, if you want to know about companies, you have to write. But they are obliged to give you this information within a period of time, and we have been using this tool in order to speed up the process of gathering information, which is, as you all know, not easy, because universities sometimes have very spread ways of put the information, and it is difficult to know the real links of universities. The knowledge about the structure, in our case, this helped us to build campaigns based on addressing academic boycott motions to the University Senate, which is the highest representative body with representation for all the groups, students, administrative staff, and academic staff. But decisions are not binding, but they drive decisions, they can influence, and they are supposed to be the things that afterwards go to the higher organism, which is the governing council, where the decisions are really binding. So in our case, one of our main campaigns was to address our demands to the University Senate and try to get them passed. Just to give you a bit of context of how the things have changed for us, in 2015, we presented a BDS motion in the Technical University of Catalonia, and the vote was lost. You see here the numbers, 54 votes in favor and 87 against, 21 blanks. But I want to go to the rector's arguments against the motion, and they were that the exclusion of Israelis, person, entity, companies, etc., will be discriminatory and illegal, so totally making a wrong lecture of what the BDS campaign is, but they used this argument. That cutting links with ICL, which is Israeli Chemical, and has the main investor in the mining, one of the mining companies in Catalonia, will have a negative economic impact for the university, and that refusing to participate in European projects where Israel would be involved will lead to the isolation of the university. So these were the arguments back then, and in 2014, 2015, we had also one of the brutal attacks on the Gaza Strip with thousands of deaths, civilians, and so on. So all this was not mentioned, but this. So lessons learned were that we really have to focus the demands that we do to the university, that we also have. We'll try to connect our struggles with other struggles, like in the case of the ICL Liver Potash mine, we connected with the environmental activism because this is one of the mines polluting all this area, and so trying to connect campaigns and gain supports from outside the movement. And also focus on the complicity and responsibility, as it was mentioned yesterday about international law, to avoid the kind of arguments that we received previously. And academic boycott campaigns in Spain have gone to another level once the grassroots movement from the students in the encampment of students took place. So this really was the trigger to make the universities commit, or at least say that they will commit. So before we had supports more as individuals, even staff members, even if they were relatively high numbers, it were only staff members and maybe one faculty, one department, but it was not possible to have the whole university making a statement, and the encampments make this difference. Of course, also the public opinion, and as Alexander was saying, the dramatic situation, the images, all this was making a context, but the encampments play a crucial role. And also the possibility that we had to create the structures and organize, like in the Red Universitaria for Palestine, where mainly staff from different universities across Spain are brought together, help us to make unified campaigns. Okay. And after October 2023, and to highlight the role of the encampments, we had on January 2024 again a BDS motion on the Technical University in Catalonia, which was this time approved by the Senate with a wide, broad support. But afterwards, it was rejected by the Government Council, where the Board of Direction has the majority of votes, so they were reluctant to go so farther from them as cutting ties with Israel. But in May 2024, so some months later, when the encampments started, this made a huge change. We passed the same motion, or more or less the same motion, through the Senate. It was approved, and very fast the Governing Council also implemented it. And it was driven by the force that this encampment was having. Of course, together, you see in the photo, there were students, but there was also society, there were associations, movements, staff, so there was a big issue. Here, well, it's just the press release that the university made. And the demands were quite okay, so they condemned the situation and recognized that the situation was due to the occupation and the apartheid system that Israel was imposing. They commit to cut ties with Israel universities and entities, but also to cut ties with companies involved in the occupation and genocide, and also make public these decisions. Well, here is more detail, maybe later on we can give, but it was an important statement. We had other reactions, like the one from all the rectors of the Spanish universities. We looked at that as a defeat. Maybe it's not, but it was a mild declaration because it was opening the possibility to still have ties with Israel if they condemn in some form the situation, which was not what we demanded, but was the reaction. Some other universities in Spain, as you see, most of them is after May, so it is after the encampments took place. Several universities make this kind of statements, and the government councils said that they will implement these measures. But we have also received attacks after these decisions, not from the government, but from Zionist associations such as ACOM, this Action and Communication on the Middle East. They are making legal complaints to different universities that have implemented this kind of academic boycotts. And as you see, the decisions are different. In some place, some judge says that it is not valid, but afterwards they try again, and depending on where you land, they can give credit to it. The university has, in this case, is the University of Granada. They have said that they have university autonomy, but still is a threat to this university autonomy. And now, as yesterday some people was mentioning, we never have a successful campaign that can end and we can relax, so we have to continue. And we have seen the importance of having a monitoring group that is in contact with the university management to implement these decisions and to follow up about this implementation. We also have to be able to communicate these achievements because the university will try to make them as silent as possible. I think yesterday PACB colleagues were speaking about silent boycott. Many times it's what happens. Even if they have made the statement, they don't want to go public about the decision. So it is in our side, in the movement side, to make publicity or to take credit of these achievements. We have had difficulties to cut ties with companies and other entities like banks profiting from occupation. This is much more difficult than maybe breaking or not renewing a bilateral agreement with an Israeli university. I think another crucial point is reinforcing the campaign to exclude Israel from the Horizon program, because this is a point where the universities say they will not build new agreements, but sometimes you don't know if they will follow, and it is difficult to follow up. And we have to manage the ups and downs of the movement. No? We have sometimes the movement is high and sometimes not, and we have to keep the structures alive. We have built this network of mainly staff, and that has helped us to continue doing acts or workshops. In this case, we organized this People's Tribunal to account for the complicity of the Spanish state on the genocide, and also trying to connect with other campaigns like the embargo campaign to build a strong campaign against one of the big banks in Spain, Santander, which is present in all the universities in Spain. So I think these kind of things can help us keeping on the movement. And thank you.
Thank you, Laia. It's really good that you ended with Horizon, because that takes us to Brittany, who was part of a coalition in Madrid, and you helped coordinate synchronized demonstrations in 15 European cities, right? Tell us more about that.
Yes. And so from the Encampment for Palestine in Madrid, we have had different objectives at short, middle, and long-term goals. And now we have ended focusing on Horizon, as you were saying. But I also want to take you a little bit backwards to see like how we evolve from bigger or like more specific boycott demands and how we end up in Horizon. So actually, you'll have to wait a little bit till we get there. So in Madrid, we've had 2 encampments for Palestine, one in 2024 and one in 2025. And now we are having a process that is post-encampment. So we continue as a movement in a very specific role of vertebrating the different movements and groups for Palestine in Madrid and organizing a more united front, no? And now, for example, for Horizon. So to give you a bit more context and building up on what Laia said, we have to acknowledge that the context in Spain is very different from other European countries, and this helped us mobilize very easily the student body. However, even if we had good student associations, a good infrastructure to strengthen it and like get that power back for the Palestinian cause, we ended up focusing, because of the urgency, on the mobilizing side. So then we had very good campaign visualizing a Polytechnic University in Madrid that is one of the topmost universities at European level doing research for the military industry and, of course, for the Zionist entity. And however, we were not able, when we camped, most of the people were not from that university. So that made it difficult because we had that incoherence. No? We had a contradiction that where we had most power in other universities in Madrid, and they were not that visibly connected to the Zionist entity. So then we had to reformulate. We had to re-strategize. And I have to say that we focused on mobilizing too much. Like this one critic that I think is very useful also to share in this context of how we make sure that we build a stable power that rises and that generates empowerment in different faculties, different universities, so that can continue not only reacting, but actually it can continue building upon the different issues, no? And so then what we did is to join the wave that groups like Samidun, BDS were driving forward. That was this campaign against for the arms embargo, an integral arms embargo, which is targeting actually the government. So it's aiming higher also because we had a window of opportunity that is not possible, like definitely not possible in other countries or states in Europe. And we saw it very useful that since we had harnessed this mobilizing power with students that could not directly do like inside work inside the university that would do the most economical damage to Zionism if we actually cut the research ties, then we saw that we could still use this wave, use this water, no, to join the bigger wave and actually go for a very ambitious proposal that could have a big domino effect and internationally, no? If a European country actually sets a real arms embargo to the Zionist entity of Israel. And that was a very interesting experience. This was already in the second encampment, so in the one in last year, in 2025. And we had to navigate the different political differences between Samidun, between BDS and other Palestinian groups, but we still managed to all go for this demand. And we actually, ourselves, like students, we organized demonstrations to go to the headquarters of the Social Democrats, which together with another questionably left political party are governing in Spain. So we went there to put the pressure that we had harnessed in university, the professors as well, the people from BDS and from Samidun, maybe from the neighborhoods also mobilizing there. And that slowly kept on rising the pressure for the government till the point that thanks to different factors like a very interesting sports boycott that happened when there was this cyclist tour in Spain, and it generated like a lot of different civil disobedience moments in different parts of the route, and it actually ended in Madrid and was abruptly ended thanks to like thousands of people going to the streets and actually blocking, like stepping into the tracks of the cyclist route, and therefore preventing the usual end of it. And these together with also, for example, an occupation from some professors, more from high schools and lower age institutions, that they occupied a cultural center that is quite renowned in Madrid. And those critical events helped kind of legitimize and show that the government was not being coherent, because of course throughout all this time that we're talking now in 2025, the government had been lying about how they had like basically stopped buying and selling weapons from Israel from the very beginning of the start of the genocide. So this kind of more radical events that had a lot of public support and actually a lot of public participation allowed to put the government in the spotlight, and that actually allowed us to, or like forced them to take a stance on this arms embargo. However, they stole the win from us, because instead of like having a law that was binding and that would actually like completely cut the ties, it was a fake. It didn't have a complete embargo, and it had this like a small star, like a footnote that says that if it's for national interest for Spain, then they can do whatever. And that's what we have now, no? However, even if it was for us not like we could take it as a partial win to keep mobilizing, but that of course since they have control over the mainstream media, this generated a huge demobilization effect, not only in Spain, but also in other countries that also got the news of like, oh, Spain now is boycotting Israel, let's try to do the same, no? Like, we saw how messed up we knew, but no, how treacherous they acted, and then we looked backwards and saw like how important it should have been to put more focus on organizing and not only on mobilizing, no? Because we got all that big wave to hit the government, but it hit a cliff and then it pulled backwards into the ocean. And now, because that cliff had grown taller, had grown higher, because of this demobilization effect, it was difficult to get people on board. And then came the fake ceasefire, and that made it even more difficult to mobilize. So now the strategy that we're using is very connected with Horizon, because we see that it allows us to generate partial victories in the different faculties of the universities, because unlike our initial focus, back with that Polytechnic University that is very focused on military research, there are a lot of universities, so like most of the universities in Madrid do take part in Horizon projects. So it's very useful to organize like in an inter-university framework with other student organizers, with different political associations, and foster this solidarity, and also join the infrastructure that is being built against privatization, because this is now a very serious problem in Madrid. And because of the demobilization effect on Palestine, like the fight and the student struggle against privatization of public universities has become like the foremost topic at student level. So then we have also like rearranged like how can we further strengthen the tree trunk of the against privatization movement, so that the branch from there that goes to Palestine can also get stronger, no? But we saw that we need to do this groundwork work, and for that Horizon is very useful. And not only for these like organizing models, but it also because it helps us that momentum that we were able to generate for the arms embargo, but that was co-opted by the government. It allows us to share it directly with our peers in other cities, no? Like what we did on December 12th with more than 15 cities all over Europe, these demonstrations to put Horizon on the spotlight was one of those ways to act in solidarity and be like, we are in different contexts. Here we can do more things without being repressed, and there's more public support. And in other countries, maybe in Ireland, they have a similar, even if different situation. So let's do a European level mobilization to also set the framework, no? Because if Horizon is a EU project, it also makes sense that we show that there is a collective response from the European inhabitants, European residents in different cities, synchronized, because that gives us power, and that allowed us to, put Horizon in the spotlight. And now what we plan to do is to scale up the action, because of course we didn't get what we wanted. Horizon has a lot of potential to have domino effects, and as some comrades were saying in these past days from the workshops, and it can also pave way to be able to target the free trade agreement between the EU and Israel. So it is a very strategic aim that we're having here. And now we also see the importance to connect this with the solidarity with our comrades from Palestine Action, because of all the increased actions that they did and everything that they are going through in resistance. And therefore, we're also planning to scale up and not only have demonstrations, but having other kinds of actions included in this potluck. While at the same time, we are encouraging other cities to join the next wave, even if they want to do a demonstration, even if they want to do a more symbolical, artistic protest, like everything will be very welcome, because we're building an umbrella. And if you join the wave, it will be easier to keep building up that pressure, that legitimacy, because we're building it bottom up in a way that is difficult for the governments to take it away. And also, unlike the arms embargo, which went into very legal jargon, and it's very difficult to contradict that it's not actually a binding embargo and so on, with Horizon it's way easier to do the follow-up and to demand and execute that transparency ourselves, so to hold the universities and the research labs accountable. So yes, all in all, and we are very excited to continue and drive this initiative forward, seeing that from our previous experiences and criticisms, it is allowing us to, like with what we actually have right now, even if we are in a demobilization moment, even in Spain, that we can still do a lot of things, and that this could become like that crack that generates like big economical losses that are some of the foundations, no, of the Zionist state of Israel.